So, what would be your reaction if you arrived home after a hard day's work and found your wife banging your 15-year-old son like a rabbit on the sofa in the living room? That's what happened to this guy here. And here he is with his wife, Alexis von Yates. This man works as a linesman for the electric power company. He was working late at night fixing some downed power lines. He then walks in the front door of his home at around 2 a.m. and he finds his wife, this woman here, in flagrante and doing the deed on the living room sofa with his 15-year-old son. And of course, this is a Florida story. That's why I'm wearing this shirt, because it's a Florida story. This couple lives in Ocala, Florida. This woman's name is Alexis von Yates. She's 35 years old and worked as a nurse. She has since had her nursing license revoked by the Florida Department of Health. She's the boy's stepmom. So I guess technically this is not incest. We aren't given the name of the husband in media reports. The police report and affidavit that was released publicly also blacks out the name of the husband and, of course, the minor. According to the son's affidavit, they were doing it on the sofa without a condom, without protection, when he walked in on them at 2 a.m. The husband screamed, "What the F is going on here?" According to the stepson, she tried to apologize to the enraged husband. Her excuse was that the son looked a lot like the father, so she just couldn't resist the son. The father then grabbed the son, told him he was taking him to his grandfather's house for the night. He was screaming at the kid that he had ruined his life. The father was reportedly drinking beer aggressively when he was driving the kid over to the grandfather's house. After he dropped the kid off at the grandfather's house, the father reportedly told his son to never contact him again because the kid was a failure. The grandfather reportedly told the kid to never tell anybody about what had happened, including the kid's mom, the mom being the father's ex-wife. But the kid apparently told his cousin about it, and apparently his cousin alerted the police. This event actually occurred in July of 2024, but is just making national news now. Alexis von Yates is charged with lewd and lascivious battery on a victim aged 12 to 16, which is a second-degree felony in Florida. She faces up to 15 years in prison for that. She's also charged with sexual battery on a person 12 to 16 years of age by a person in familial or custodial authority, which is a first-degree felony in Florida. She faces up to 30 years in prison for that. So if she were to get the maximum sentence for both crimes, that would be 45 years in prison for her if her sentences for these crimes were to be served consecutively. Now, realistically, she's probably not going to serve anything close to that. She'll probably plea it out. My guess is she'll serve maybe 5 years, something like that. Still no joke. So the way this went down, according to the police report and the affidavit from the son, Alexis had just put the two younger siblings down for bed. Then Alexis and the teen were hanging out on the sofa together, sitting close by, and they were playing video games and watching movies together. They were watching the movie Terrifier 2. They had already watched Terrifier 1 the night before. She told him she was horny because she hadn't had sex with her husband in 2 weeks, and he reports that his adrenaline was quite high as she was rubbing up against him. He also said that she'd been flirting with him for about a week, making sexual jokes and innuendos. At one point, she put whipped cream on his cheek and licked it off. She then asked him if he liked that, according to the affidavit, and during the week she informed the teen that she was horny. And I'm not going to go into details of what transpired on the sofa because I don't want to violate YouTube's guidelines. YouTube pretty much just wants stuff that's G-rated. But she was on period and he wasn't using a condom. I'll post some links below in case you're interested in more detail. Plus, I'm more interested in the thought process of this stepmom. What was she thinking? This woman must have the brain of a gnat. Zero self-control. And how would you like to be this husband, this father, having to return to his blue-collar job working on the electric power lines? How would you like to show up to work after this? Can you imagine? He'll never live this down. But I'll say this, and I'll probably get some blowback for this opinion. I think there is a big difference between this happening to a 15-year-old male than if the sexes were reversed. It just seems a whole lot worse to me if this had been a 34-year-old man doing this with a 15-year-old girl. If I were the judge, I'd probably give her 3 years in the slammer to think about it. But if the adult had been a male, I'd probably give him 10 years. It just seems a lot worse to me if the adult male had been targeting a 15-year-old girl, probably because males tend to be stronger than females. So there tends to be physical force involved, whereas females have to rely on seduction. And when I was 15 years old, I did have a bit of a crush on my French teacher. Pretty much all the guys in my French class felt the same way. I don't think any of the 15-year-old guys in my French class would have said no to that. It just seems to be an entirely different dynamic if the sexes are reversed, at least in my view. What do you think? Am I off base on that? In France, the age of consent is 15, which is ridiculous. But it is France, famous for the Marquis de Sade and all kinds of sexual perversion. I just put out a video titled, Is Candace Owens Right or Wrong About Brigitte Macron? Candace believes that Brigitte was born a male. So check out my video on that if you're interested in this topic. Brigitte met the future president of France, Emmanuel Macron, when she was his 39-year-old drama teacher, and he was 14 years old. They claim he didn't have a romantic relationship until he was 15 or 16 or 17. The story keeps changing. Air quotes for the word romantic. And here she is with the future president of France when he was 15, and he looks pretty happy about it. She would have gotten many years in prison in America for this, but it's fine in France. Well, actually, it's not even fine in France because she was his teacher, so was in a position of power over him. So this would be a crime even in France. But when Emmanuel Macron ran for president of France in 2016, Brigitte Macron was celebrated in the media as the embodiment of modern feminism. The media would ask, why can't a woman have a boyfriend or a husband that is 25 years younger than she is, like many men do? After all, Donald Trump is 25 years older than Melania. But of course, the issue is not the age gap. The issue is that Brigitte met Emmanuel when he was 14 years old, was her 14-year-old student. She was his teacher, and she was married and had 3 children at the time. And she left her husband of 32 years to be with young Emmanuel Macron, the future president of France. The propaganda media portrayed this relationship as romantic, sexy, edgy, avant-garde. So it really depends on the politics for how the media portrays things. And of course, we had the public schools introducing children as young as kindergarten to LGBTQ ideology, and even introducing these kids, these 5 and 6-year-olds, to the idea that they can change their gender, and maybe should consider doing that. In Democrat-run blue states like California, drag queen story hour is a common occurrence for kindergartners.
Does anyone know what a drag queen is? No? Do you know what a drag queen is? But they warm up, they get to know who I am. A drag queen is a character you create to express your feminine side or any other side of yourself that you'd like to explore.
I would like to be a superhero.
Yeah, you could be a drag queen superhero.
That seems more perverse and twisted to me than what gnat-brained Alexis did. Drag queen story hour for kindergartners and introducing kindergartners to the idea that they can change their gender strikes me as systemic evil, whereas what Alexis did was just insanely stupid. Also, there seems to be something going on in Ocala, Florida. A few years ago, another Alexis in Ocala, Florida, a woman named Alexis Carroll, was arrested for engaging in acts on a toddler. She even captured this on video. Holy crap! What the hell is going on with people named Alexis in Ocala, Florida? If convicted, this Alexis from Ocala, Florida, Alexis Carroll, faces life in prison. So this is many orders of magnitude worse than what the other Alexis did. When I see a story like this, my brain tends to ask the question, well, where does this fall on the scale of human depravity? And one of my themes is just how badly do humans behave once the constraints of civilization are removed? This is the theme of the classic book Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, also Lord of the Flies. I'm basically of the view that humans are more evil than good, that when civilizational constraints dissolve, all hell tends to break loose. Probably the 2 most depraved humans of my lifetime are John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. I'd put Gacy as number 1, Dahmer as number 2 in terms of pure evil. Dahmer was eating his victims. Gacy was targeting children. So I think that makes Gacy worse than Dahmer, but it's close. And then where do we put mass murdering dictators on the scale of human evil? We have Adolf Hitler, who killed 6 million Jews in systematic fashion. He exterminated another 5 million people who he considered racially or genetically inferior. Most alarmingly, the German people went along with this program. They were all on board with rounding up the Jews. Then we have Pol Pot in Cambodia. He killed off 1/4 of Cambodia's population. We have Mao Zedong, who killed off 30 to 60 million of his own people as part of his cultural revolution. Joseph Stalin killed off 20 or 30 million of his own people. So yeah, what Alexis von Yates did was incredibly brainless, but she is pretty far down the scale of human depravity. But what she did tends to trigger more moral outrage on social media than the truly unfathomable levels of human evil out there. If I were the judge, I'd give her 3 years in the slammer to think about it and maybe turn her life around. What do you think? Where on the scale of human depravity does Alexis von Yates fit in? My dad was a professor of English literature at Dartmouth College, and when something like this would hit the news, sometimes involving somebody we'd know, my dad would just say, "Well, people are a lot crazier than you think." A good friend of mine turned out to be a nationally famous bank robber. I had known him since college. He was, of course, caught and served 18 years in prison. No one who knew him had any clue this was going on. A neighbor of ours was just convicted last year of a gruesome murder. We used to see him every evening walking his dogs past our house, often with his girlfriend. We'd say hello and sometimes chat with him. Seemed like a very nice guy. He was convicted last year of hiring two Latin Kings gang members to kill the husband of his sister, a famous law professor at Florida State University named Dan Markel. Our neighbor's name was Charlie Adelson. He's in prison for life now. So is his girlfriend, who we also used to see walking the dogs past the house. We'd sometimes say hello to her. She was his connection to the Latin Kings who he hired for the hit. Her former boyfriend who carried out the hit was the top Latin King for North Miami. So that's what was going on 3 houses down from us on our little street. You just never really know what's going on in people's lives. And I think Charlie was pulled into this situation by his mother and his sister. The sister, Wendy, was going through a bitter divorce. The mother, Donna, is on trial now. Most observers of these legal proceedings believe that Charlie was talked into this by his mother and his sister. So the mother, Donna, is on trial now, and probably the sister, Wendy, is up next. And this is a highly successful family. Our neighbor, Charlie Adelson, was reportedly earning $3 million a year, at least some years, from his dental practice. His father also had a very financially successful dental practice. Charlie had a Ferrari and other fancy cars, millions of dollars in the bank. So Charlie, our neighbor, threw his life away on this. And I might do a video on this because this is really one of the more fascinating murder cases that I've followed over the last few years, and it involves one of our neighbors. So yeah, people are often, probably usually, a lot crazier under the surface than you think. On the surface, they seem to be living normal lives. You just never really know what's going on in someone's brain, what's going on beneath the surface. It's often just so crazy you could never make it up. That's why I prefer true stories, which are so much more interesting to me than fiction. And if you like true crime type stories, life is stranger than fiction type stories, check out my video, How the CIA Created Charles Manson, which fits both my true crime genre plus my overall thesis of how dangerous the CIA and deep state really are. Well, that's all I have for you today. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as this helps with the algo. And you might be interested in this book on Amazon, Win Life, Success Skills Schools Don't Teach. This book is primarily aimed at young people in their teens to early 30s. But this book should be of interest to anyone who's interested in getting into the top 1% of income earners. Or maybe you have more modest goals. Maybe you're just interested in losing 20 pounds. This book will help you do that as well. This book will help you achieve most of what you want to achieve in life.